Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 251, cover dated early November 1989. This is an iconic, stunning cover of Wolverine crucified by Marc Silvestri and Dan Green, and the colours here really make this cover pop. The purple, the lurid, almost fluorescent green, a stunning cover. And one that, when we open this up, almost leads in to the splash page and subsequent pages. So this story is titled Fever Dream, and as the caption proclaims, it stars the last of the Uncanny X-Men, and Wolverine is here baking under the Outback Australian sun. Creative team is Chris Claremont, writer, Marc Silvestri and Dan Green, artists. That means that Silvestri is perhaps doing breakdowns on some pages, and Dan Green is finishing. Tom Orzechowski, letterer, Glynis Oliver, colorist. Now this particular issue also marks the end of the Outback era of the X-Men, and so in a certain sense it bookends a storyline or an era that began with Uncanny X-Men 229, when the X-Men arrived in the Outback town, the home of the Reavers, and in effect evicted them and gave the survivors the choice of dying or going through the Siege Perilous. And that is bookended in this story with the surviving X-Men, the last of the Uncanny X-Men, making the decision to go through the Siege Perilous themselves. So let's open past this. Again, another stunning splash page here by Silvestri and Green. And here we have it. So Wolverine crucified under the harsh Australian outback sun and woken up by Donald Pierce, former White Bishop of the Hellfire Club, and now a cyborg himself. And Wolverine is baking in the sun, sweating profusely, and he doesn't give Pierce the reaction that he wants, and this really annoys Pierce. And here watching we have the Reavers, and we also have the survivors of Wolverine's mauling of Hellfire Club troopers, Cole, Reese, and is it pronounced Macon or Mason? One or the other. Here they are here, a Lady Deathstrike as well, Pretty Boy, Skullbuster and Bone Cruncher there too. So this is a great page where Wolverine finally responds to Pierce and tells him, "I'm impressed." And Pierce slaps him in the face and exclaims, "You dare mock me." And it's been pointed out by other commentators how here we see Orzechowski using different size for the lettering and giving each one of the words its own balloon. So really nice combination of artist, letterer, colorist here. And also note Claremont holding back on any narrative captions here. Everything is communicated in the art, in the comic book storytelling, and in the dialogue. So Pierce tells Wolverine, "This round then to you, enjoy the taste of victory, little man. You have my word, it'll be your last." And Wolverine glares at him, "Wanna bet?" So this is a stunning, almost solo Wolvie story comparable to Uncanny X-Men 205, and really putting Wolverine through the ringer in terms of who he is as the X-Men's tough man, stoic type, and taking real punishment here from Pierce and the Reavers. But noticeably Lady Deathstrike not really taking part in any of this, just an observer. And it's Deathstrike who in particular has feels she has a family obligation to kill Wolverine. So interesting that she isn't really involved in any of this, just a mute witness to it. So as Wolverine continues to bake in the sun, we get to see the Reavers checking out the town, because one of them, I think it is, which one of them is it? Is it Cole? No, it's Reese. Yeah, Reese is the one who seems or believes he saw something moving in the town, senses something in the town, that someone exists who's immune to the electronic scanners in the town. And of course, we know that there is somebody in the town who is not showing up on those scanners, and it is Jubilee here, who's making her way out of an air vent, and gets to see what's happening to Wolverine, as she thinks to herself there, that's one of the X-Men in the street, no sign of any of his pals, or that old geek Gateway. Where'd everybody go? What's happening? And indeed, where is Gateway? So we catch back with Wolverine here, and I would say at this point, I'm pretty certain that this is Dan Green doing the finishes here on this particular page. Wolverine has a vision of Gateway swinging his bull roar, and the original Outback team arriving through a teleportal gateway, including himself. So at this point, he knows that it's crazy. And then he sees Rogue fading away, Longshot and himself, and then Havok blasting and killing Aurora Storm with one of his plasma blasts. So this is, for the reader, a catch-up on some of the major events from previous months, but also, as Wolverine's wondering, it's crazy, I'm crazy, Wolverine somehow is having in his fever dream a vision of what indeed has happened in the Outback town since he took a leave of absence back in Uncanny X-Men 246. And so what's going on here? Has Gateway somehow invited Wolverine into the dream time, and this is how he is getting this information? The narrative doesn't, the comic itself doesn't clear that up, so readers are left to speculate. And then another Psylocke, as he sees, emerges from one of the buildings in the town, and exclaims to Wolverine, see what the Reavers have done to her. And we saw in the previous issue Psylocke have a vision of her death and the deaths of the other X-Men, and saw herself as a cyborg too. So perhaps this is what would become of the X-Men were they to be captured by the Reavers. But we'll see what does indeed happen to the X-Men shortly. Again, I think this is a page here where it is Dan Green who's doing the finishes on this. So this kind of fever dream version of Psylocke pops these claws, rather like Lady Deathstrike's claws, slashes Gateway, slashes herself, and tearing her skin away, there emerges Sabretooth. And around this time, Claremont was teasing what might be Sabretooth's relation to Wolverine. But one of the things that was clear was that Sabretooth was determined that the only one who would kill Wolverine is him, Sabretooth. So Sabretooth, or the dream vision of him, mocks Wolverine for how uncareful he was with his arrival at the town. So we see a flashback now to Wolverine arriving to the town in a car, a Jeep, and how when he entered into the tavern, he was punched out onto the street, and then how he was captured here by the various Reavers and strung up on the scaffold by Pierce. and whipped as well. So really evocative storytelling here from Silvestri and Green. And I like the way this is represented. This kind of spectral image of Wolverine being placed up onto the scaffold where he is hallucinating, having this fever dream, is partly in the dream time. And then he has a vision of his old Japanese master, Ogun, wearing, well, it's Sabretooth wearing Ogun's mask. And Sabretooth blames Wolverine in respect of killing his former master, and Wolverine responds he had to, or he'd have done worse to Kitty Pryde. And Wolverine is of the opinion, or not of the opinion here, but is basically saying to this version of Sabretooth and Ogun that he's tired, maybe his string's finally run out. Is he going to give in? Is he going to die? And here we have the point. Sabretooth cares, Ogun says, because nobody gets to kill you but him. And what happens here is interesting, again, as part of this kind of dream vision, this dream time fever dream, where Ogun uses his samurai sword to free Wolverine, but it's like a spectral version of himself. And who catches him except Kitty Pryde, who was wearing the mask? And basically, she gives him a pep talk about fighting for his own life. And also she reveals to him the arrival of the X-Men atop Gateway's hill. So Wolverine witnesses the X-Men arriving. He's still skeptical about the reality of it. It's a fever dream. Kitty says to him, it isn't real, it's a fever dream. Your spirit's with me, your body's still on the scaffold. And these are events that have already happened. There's nothing you can do to change them. So that's interesting. So that kind of reveals that the X-Men arrived, and we'll see what happens to them shortly. They arrived before Wolverine arrived to the town. Okay, so then we see what happened at the end of the when we picked up, like this is picking up from the end of the previous issue, when the X-Men were teleported by Gateway unexpectedly back to the town, and Psylocke had that vision of their deaths, and so she is determined that they use the Siege Perilous to escape their fate and give themselves all a second chance. And we get this kind of sum up reflection of everything from Havok here. How can we even call ourselves a team anymore? Just the four of us left, living out in the middle of nowhere. What good are we to anyone? How does this further Professor Xavier's dream? Remember, the one that brought us all together, or a better world where mutant and human can live together in peace. Listen to me, mutant and human, as though being the one precluded the other. It's like we perpetuate the prejudice, even as we try to fight it. Well, I've had it, folks. I've paid my dues. We all have, with the scars to prove it. I say the time's come to call it quits. So, interesting speech here. I like the way that Claremont works in, like the nonsense of the preclusion of mutant and human. That one precludes the other. It really goes to the heart of Xavier's view in particular. But Havok here, and we see that in previous issues, all the X-Men, including Colossus even, are all really broken down psychologically. Dazzler too, guilty over what happened to Rogue with the Siege Perilous in Manhattan. Everybody's really at a low ebb. But Wolverine doesn't believe it. But the vision of Kitty says, why? Because Havok's making sense. And again, this is a point, if Wolverine had been there, would he have been enough to keep up the morale of the team, whereby they would have taken on the Reavers? But at this point, they decide to go with what Psylocke is suggesting, that it's for the best that they go through the Siege Perilous. So Colossus goes through, Dazzler goes through, Meanwhile, the Reavers are making their way up to the top of the hill, recognizing that something's happening up there. And then Alex is the one who actually hesitates. "This isn't right," he says. "Second thoughts. I'm not sure. Not about what I said. I stand by that. It came from the heart," he says. And she asks him, "Don't you trust me?" even as she's represented there in silhouette. And he says, "The conclusions I came to are justified," she suggests. "The choices I'm making are the right ones, so you say. So why do I feel I'm betraying everything and everyone I hold dear," even as he goes through the Siege Perilous gateway itself. And what we see here and what we learn is that Psylocke was using her powers to persuade the X-Men, but in particular Havok here, to go through the Siege Perilous. So to what extent did the X-Men make Colossus, Dazzler and Havok make free choices? But she says that it's picking up on Havok's phrasing. It's not him who's betraying everything and everyone he held dear, but it's her. It's the cross she chooses to bear, making that decision for them. Just as the Reavers arrive, and then she denies them their victory. "You'll kill no X-Men today," she says, as she goes through the siege, and as it reverts to its crystal gem form. And Wolverine realizes she did this. Psylocke used her telepathy to trick the others through the crystal. And then we have Kitty transform into the Brood Queen, and we get this vision of the Brood Queen chomping down on Wolverine's head. And now we get to this really brutal section of the comic. Again, this is definitely Dan Green finishes on these pages. So it's that night, the dream's over, the fever's broken, Wolverine's back to reality, and Pierce comes along with these wooden stakes, which he drives through Wolverine's hands and feet. So here we have a further pointing of the Christian symbolism here going on with the crucifixion of Wolverine. And we have Jubilee's horrified witness and the tears she sheds witnessing what happens to Wolverine. So interesting choice. Doesn't show us, would they have been able to show it in a Comics Code approved authority comic? I don't know, but it's an interesting choice just to show what's happening to Wolverine through Jubilee's anguished reaction. And then we learn, well, Wolverine didn't make a sound through it all. So Pierce is absolutely disgusted and frustrated that he's not getting the reaction from Wolverine that he wants. And just at the point then that he gets the news that there's a storm moving in, and see Lady Deathstrike here, just not saying anything, just not involved, a witness to it, but not involved. So the storm is a major one. Never scanned a storm like this. Best we get undercover and batten down. So Pierce decides to leave Wolverine out there for the night and crushes the Siege Perilous. "You won't be following the X-Men," he says, "and they won't ever be coming back. You're mine until you die, and that won't be for a very long, long time." So back to the fever dream then. Wolverine has a vision of Storm. And what's interesting here is that this vision of Storm begins to de-age. And we'll see a final element of that shortly. And he also has a vision of Phoenix in her Dark Phoenix costume. And he has a vision of Mariko, Yashida, his ex-fiancée. And we have also Carol Danvers as well. And a little pickup of something we learned in the Genoshan 4-part story, whereby we learned that at one point Wolverine saved her from the KGB against impossible odds when everyone else had abandoned me. So these are basically encouraging Wolverine to keep fighting, but he is at the point of giving up. It's over, don't you see? I'm done, he says. And then we get that he has this vision of a child, of Storm as a child, and with her costume baggy around her. And it's interesting what she says to him. If that is true, Logan, then so am I. And of course, what we will learn in subsequent months is that Storm didn't die at the end of Uncanny X-Men 248, but that she was transported to Cairo, Illinois, aboard Nanny's ship, which also wasn't destroyed. It was a decoy that was destroyed. And here's interesting. We have Wolverine's thoughts. Never known weather like this. Wonder suddenly if Storm really is a goddess. And this her way of showing she's really angry. Can't help laughing. I mean, she's dead right. Shot down by Havok. So how come I'm seeing her, of all my phantoms, as a little kid? And then we have this weird little moment between Pretty Boy and Deathstrike where he's trying to charm her, and basically she's having absolutely none of it. And then we get this point from the radio, reports of unseasonable gales from across the globe, torrential rain, hurricane force winds, floods, the worst centered around the city of Cairo, Illinois. So again, that is ultimately where Storm will pop up when she returns to the series in months to come. And then we check back with Wolverine outside in the storm, and Jubilee witnessing him and wondering whether she should help, or what would happen to her if the Reavers caught her helping him. And as she considers her next move, Wolverine is determined to get loose. I want to scream, he thinks. That's good. I give it all the voice I got. Who's to hear through all the thunder? Pain's a goad, makes me mad, makes me crazy. But Jubilee is the witness to it. And she thinks to herself, but this, what is that guy? Some animal? And that's a little callback for me anyway to Katie Power and her encounter with Wolverine in bestial mode in 205. And that is always Wolverine's struggle to retain his humanity, his reason, and not give in to his bestial self. But here he needs to tap that bestial shadow side in order to get free of this scaffold and survive in order to help Storm and the other X-Men. So he gets one arm free, and remember, his hands are pinned with those wooden stakes. Then he gets the second one. Great cartooning here by Silvestri, and the inks by Green. And as I said earlier, I think this is another finished page by Green. He gets his second arm free, and his legs too. You can see there's 2 stakes through here. And Jubilee has to cover her ears from it. So she sees he's freed himself, and she recognizes he needs help. What's he to you? She thinks. If those guys get their hands on him again, if they get their hands on me, so kid, he says to her, he addresses her. He saw me, he knows I'm here, she thinks. You gonna give a fella a hand or what? And to be continued. So really a stunning issue in the series, a real memorable one, bookending the Outback era. In 229, the X-Men took over the town. They destroyed the Reavers, sent the survivors through the Siege Perilous. Here it's all reversed. The X-Men are evicted from the town in effect, and the surviving X-Men go through the Siege Perilous themselves. But Wolverine survived, and what's going to happen next, of course, is to be determined in 2 weeks' time. So I hope that you enjoyed this video review of Uncanny X-Men 251. If you did, please like the video, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.